Hi, my name is Patrick Rail. I am here to introduce you to my game, An Irrepressible Conflict, the presidential election of 1860. This game is about the presidential election of 1860, which started the American Civil War. It's a four-player historical board game, plays in about 90 minutes with experienced players, and is of medium weight. Let's put coin games several notches higher. The key mechanic is area control. Comparable games might be Votes for Women, Corrupt Bargain, Divided Republic, Tammany Hall. It's about those subjects, those mechanics, that weight. What you do in this game is play one of the four major political parties that contested the presidential election of 1860. You'll appoint and stump your politicians in order to organize and canvass voters. They're the ones who give you the means to win state elections. So, of course, there's a big presidential election at the end of the game, and that's worth an awful lot. But along the way, there are a series of state elections that give you mid-game scoring points and objectives. The name of this game is inspired by a famous speech by William Henry Seward, who spoke about the conflict between freedom and slavery in the United States in the decades before 1860. He said this, that it is an irrepressible conflict between opposing and enduring forces, and it means that the United States must and will sooner or later become either entirely a slaveholding nation or entirely a free labor nation. Here are the four candidates who vied for the presidency in this election. They are represented by their colors as they appear in the game. So red is Abraham Lincoln and his Republicans, blue, Stephen Douglas and his Northern Democrats, green, John Breckinridge and his Southern Democrats, and yellow is John Bell and his Constitutional Unionists. And the two-letter abbreviation that are used throughout the game appear there as well. Here's a political cartoon from the day just to kind of help us set ourselves in time. This is a cartoon of the four nominees in this strange race tearing the country apart, or a map of the country. Lincoln and Douglas are tearing the North away from the South. Breckinridge is tearing the South away from the North. Now, this is a pro-John Bell Constitutional Union cartoon, and so it depicts him trying to mend the nation, sew it back up together. So just to kind of give us a sense of what things were like in the day. That did not work for the Constitutional Unionists. The election was won by Abraham Lincoln. He won an electoral majority. That is at least half of all electoral votes of the states. There were 303 of those available in 1860. He took over 153 of them, which was the mark. It would have been easily possible for a four-way race to be thrown into the House of Representatives. That would be a contingent election as mandated by the 12th Amendment. And that's what had happened in 1824, the last time there had been a strong four-way race. So it was really kind of remarkable in many ways that the Republicans were able to take such a complete victory. They did it by focusing on the states of highest electoral value, New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Success of the Republicans in the presidential election of 1860 sparked 7 Deep South states to secede, beginning in December of 1860. There was the firing of Confederate artillery on the federal forces at Fort Sumter in April of 1861. After that, Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to join the United States Army, and then 4 more slaveholding states seceded. 4 more still, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware, remained tenuously within the Union for the entire war. So why did these states secede? Lincoln himself had said repeatedly that he had no purpose to interfere with slavery where it exists. He did not think he had a right to go into the states, and everyone agreed on this in the major political parties. So he said, look, I'm not going to take down territory. The Republican Party was of a very lukewarm kind of anti-slavery. All it really stood for in terms of slavery was to keep it out of the territories. Lincoln offered words of conciliation in his first inaugural address. This beautiful paragraph. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Remarkable words, but they did not conciliate those slaveholding states who left the Union. If there's ever any question over why they left the Union, we have but to look at their declarations of secession to get sentiments like Mississippi's. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. In March of 1861, just a few weeks after Lincoln gave his inaugural address, the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, gave his famous cornerstone speech in which he, too, told posterity what secession was about. He said, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Those are the egalitarian ideas of the founding fathers. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. So if anyone ever argues that it was states' rights that began the Civil War, ask them states' rights to do what? And that is to take slavery into the territories. So the Confederate states seceded not because of something that had already happened, but what they feared would happen. They thought that slavery was imperiled, and so they left the Union. There's a big historical questions about how that really happened, and the election of 1860 is all about that. The splitting of the Democratic Party into two wings, Northern and Southern, doomed the party from what might have been an easy win into a Republican victory. And it was that Republican victory that drove the states to secede. So one thing we want to get to in the bottom of all this is how the Democratic Convention split. That will be in accompanying notes for this game. Here is a prototype of the game as it lays on the table. 4 player positions here. Here's the Mapboard. It is comprised of the 33 states that made up the Union in 1860. It's divided into 3 regions. Each of those is divided into 2 subregions. We also have to be thinking about border states and whether a state is a free state or a slave state. So this is just a little rundown of the states and how they're organized into regions and subregions. Let's take a closer look at one of these states and pull it apart. Here's Pennsylvania. You get the state name on the map. You have the indication that it's a border state by the double underline. Northern border states have their double underline underneath. Southern border states have their double overline, we might say, over the state name. We're told how many electoral votes a state has. Its state value, that is equates to victory points at the end of the game if you win the election card for that state. You also have a resource symbol here, which is used for patronage, which cheapens actions. I'll explain that. Sometimes when a state is not physically adjacent, it will be indicated that for purposes of the game, it is adjacent, as here in New Jersey. And the indication here of whether it is a slave state or not is the chain symbol at the end of the name. Let's take a look at the units you'll be working with. You have voters, which are in this prototype represented by mini meeples, and you have politicians, which are represented by full-size, like Carcassonne-sized meeples. Voters are worth 1 vote each if they are activated, that is standing up. If they're prone, and they usually come in prone, they're worth only 1/2 vote each. A couple things about these unactivated. Not only are they worth 1/2 a vote each, unactivated voters alone can never win a state. So even if you are winning a state and you have tons of unactivated voters and you're clearly beating others, or there is no one else there, you can't win that state unless at least one of those voters is activated. The other thing is that unactivated voters generally cannot be moved around. Politicians, what are they good for? Well, they're not worth any actual votes, but they do help break ties, and they help you organize, that is, place voters, canvass or move voters, and activate voters. You have presence in a state as long as you have at least either one of these in there. So one unactivated voter gives you as much presence as any number of other pieces that are yours. Here's what it can all look like on the map. You've got voters here. These are unactivated. You've got a Republican politician and a blue Northern Democratic politician in Ohio, along with each one has an activated voter. Constitutional Unionists in Illinois have 1 unactivated voter. So if we're looking at a state like Ohio here is how we would count the votes. The Republicans have no votes because they have a politician there who is worth none. Constitutional Unionists have 1/2 a vote. Even if there was no other voters in there, they still couldn't win that state because they're not activated. Northern Democrats have 1.5 votes because they have an activated voter and an unactivated voter. Now, how can you tell who is winning a state? It's easy. It's the party with the most votes. But you're often tied on that. And so you break ties in favor of the party with the most politicians in the state. If you're still tied, go to the sub-region, go to the region, go to the entire country. If you're still tied, then the party that is trailing on the action track gets the nod there. It is possible for a state to be unwon because no activated, or because it cannot be won by only unactivated voters. The Mapboard also has resource symbols on it, and these are used for patronage. So just let me show you something about how that works. Let's say the party wants to take an action in Delaware. So Delaware is the target state. Delaware has one of these 4 resource symbols on it. It's the ballot box. And the player is going to have action cards, and you're going to need to use these cards just to take an action. So the player plays the John Brown Aftermath card, which is worth 3 action points. That is up in the upper left. And it can play another action card of matching symbol to gain 1 more action point. And that is regardless of its action point value. So the player submits Transcontinental Railroad, which is matching symbol to Delaware, and it gets a free AP. So that's the map sheet and the states. You'll also have an election array, which holds state election cards. These are cards you're trying to win in state elections. in order to get their victory points at the end of the game. You see on these state election cards, they have a resource symbol. We just saw how that can be used for patronage. There's a state value, that is the victory points if you have this at the end of the game. The electoral votes that go to the state, you'll be using those to count up in the presidential election. State name, an image of the state and the color of its subregion, and the region and subregion. So these are the cards you're going to be going for in state elections. I'll show you how that happens a little later. Let's take a look a little bit more closely at the election array. This is set up next to the board. It holds state election cards that will come up for vote. These give you sort of mid-game objectives. They earn you points toward the end game, which can be really important. They also sort of help direct your energy as you try to build toward the general election. This is also the game clock. When you can't fill the front row anymore, that is signaling the end of the game. So you have two rows here. You have front burner states. Those will come up next for election. And then you have the back burner states, which will come up after them. When a gap is created in the front burner, it is replenished from the back burner. When you are thinking about this array and the cards that are in it, we want to make sure that there is proper regional representation. And so we have the rule of 3, which says that one card from each of 3 regions must be in the array and a maximum of 3 from one region. So this is the range of possible configurations. And this is what the array might look like in terms of regions at any point in the game, just as an example. Let's turn now to action cards. Each party will have a hand of these with a hard hand limit of 5, and you will need to play these in order to play those campaign actions of working with voters and politicians. We have 2 examples here. I will kind of break this down. On the upper left, the card gives you its action point value. These are sort of free action points that you can spend. A resource symbol is there. We just saw how that works for patronage. We have 2 listed states here. These are used to enhance the value of state cards when you win an election, and they're used for an optional rule about contesting elections. You also have a band at the top here that is about the preferred party or parties, if any. In these instances, the Southern Democrats on the left in the green band, Republicans on the right in the red band are the sole preferred parties for this card. If more than one party were preferred, the band would be gray. If all parties were preferred, there would be no band at all. The preferred party tells you who gets the bonus action in the gray band below. You get an event title and type. There will be descriptions of these and accompanying game materials. The card will tell you what actions you can play with it. In this instance, you can play Organize, Canvass, and Lobby. You can play All, Some, or None of these in any order that you wish. On the left, with the plug uglies, you would read that card by saying you can Stump or Caucus and Organize or Canvass. So it will let you take 2 separate actions here if you wish. It gives you a choice on each one of those. And once again, you can take these in any order. The top of the gray band gives you the event's preferred location, the bonuses that apply to the card, may only be taken in this region. So for the plug uglies, only in the border states. For the free soilism card, only in the prairie states. And you can see the kinds of things we have here: deactivate one opposing voter, deactivate one friendly voter anywhere, to activate one friendly voter, that kind of thing. Bonus action is listed there in gray. Then at the bottom, you have an all-party bonus. Now, if you're taking, so on the left, if you're not a Southern Democrat, but you're taking an action in the border states, this would apply to you. Free soilism does not have an all-party bonus. So those are action cards. Let's take a look at the action system a little bit. Let's turn now to the action track. Actions cost action points, which are recorded here. The next action is always taken by the trailing party. You'll also see a penny on here. I'll talk about that in a second. So here's our action track. I'm populating it with action tokens of the player parties. Constitutional Union, yellow, will go first. So this is just a little animation to show you how these action points are spent here. It's a not unfamiliar system to a lot of gamers. Let's take a look at how patronage can impact this system. We'll go back to our example of Delaware, where a party is trying to use the John Brown Aftermath card to take an action. They have organized canvas or caucus, and caucus. They can do all three of those things or any combination of those in any order. Let's say that whatever they do, Delaware is the target state and the total action cost is 6 action points. The action card itself takes care of 3 of those action points. They're also submitting a card for patronage. You can see the ballot box card, which matches symbol on the state. So that is an additional AP, and that reduces the total cost of the action down to 2 AP. Those are the spaces on the action track that will need to be recorded. So that's just a walkthrough of how this action track works. On its turn, party takes its party action. So you take one action, but it may be comprised of a bunch of smaller actions. Your action costs a minimum of 1 action point. So no matter what patronage or bonuses you get, you're always going to be paying 1 point to take a turn. Here are the actions that you'll see on those action cards. There are sort of 2 flavors. The main ones are these campaign actions. Organized voters and canvass voters. It's going to let you place and move voters on the board, respectively. Appoint politician, stump politician. These are going to let you place and move politicians. Activation, we've already seen that before. That's something that politicians can do. There are other actions that you'll be able to take. Caucus action will let you have some control over the state cards in the array and when they come up for state election. I'll show you that. The lobby action lets you restore your hand of action cards. And the poll action is this very important one that lets you hold state elections. A couple concepts here. We've seen patronage operating before. The target state is the state that each sub-action begins. So you just want to be mindful of what the target state is. It will help you figure out how to pay those patronage costs. There is a one-sheet player aid that covers all of this. Once you get going in this game, this is the only thing you'll need to play. Only piece of paper, that is. Let's take a look at the first of these actions. This is organize, or how you place voters on the map board. Take this action and you can place 1 to 3 unactivated voters in target states. The cost is 2 action points each. If there's a friendly politician in the state, you have a choice. You can either reduce the AP cost by 1, or you can place the voter activated. You have to have presence in the state, which means just any other unit, politician, voter, activated, unactivated, doesn't matter. And you need parity, which I'll talk about here in just a second. If you place more than 1 voter and the second or third is in a region other than the first, you pay 1 AP for that voter, an additional one. Say we have a situation like this. Here we are, Republicans have 1 unactivated voter in Pennsylvania, but that gives them presence. And they simply place another one there. It's going to cost 2 action points, and it will go down unactivated. Were there a Republican politician there, it would either cost only 1 AP, or it would arrive activated. Let's talk about parity for a second. This is a way to semi-lock or make it hard for other parties to play in a state. And the principle is this. In order to place, you have to have parity. You have parity if it has, if you have equal or better number of voters, or equal or better number of politicians. So in other words, if you're behind on voters, you need equality or better on politicians in order to organize in or canvass into a state. So here's an example. We've got the Northern Democrats have 2 voters and a politician in Pennsylvania. Constitutional Union has only 1 voter there. Constitutional Union does not have parity. It is behind on both voters and politicians. Were they able to appoint or stump a politician into Pennsylvania, they now have parity, because even though they're behind on voters, they have equality or better on politicians. Now, of course, if there's no politicians in the state, both parties would have 0 politicians, hence they'd be equal, hence they'd both have parity. So now Constitutional Union has parity. Let's say it was able to get 2 more voters in there to organize 2 more in Pennsylvania. Northern Democrats still have parity. Even though they're being outvoted, they have equality or better on politicians. What now if the Constitutional Unionists are able to get another politician into Pennsylvania? Well, now they're ahead on both politicians and voters, and so Northern Democrats now lack parity. So that's how that whole system works. If you just remember, if you're behind on voters, you need equality or better on politicians. Let's move on to the canvass action, which lets you move voters. Take this action and you can move 1 to 3 activated voters from target to adjacent states. The first move you make from one state to another with a voter costs 1 AP. The second one will cost an additional AP, whether it's the same voter or not. We're counting the moves, and we don't worry about whether they're how they're distributed among voters. The third move would cost an additional 3 AP. So it's pretty cheap in the beginning, but it can get expensive without some patronage. This requires parity. You cannot move into a state unless you have parity there. And if a voter is crossing a subregion boundary, that adds an AP to the cost. Let's say we had a situation like this. Republicans have presence in Virginia and New York, and they have 2 voters in Pennsylvania. They choose to canvass both of those voters. The first one goes to New York. That costs 1 AP. The second one is going to cost a total of 3 AP. It's the second voter canvassed, and it is crossing a subregional boundary, making the total cost of this action 4 AP. Just a reminder about activation here. A voter standing up is worth 1 vote. Unactivated, a voter is worth only half a vote. But you can use this canvass action to canvass an organized voter from another state, and that will only cost 1 AP in this instance, and now the votes change. Those are the two actions that impact voters most directly. Here are the ones for politicians. To appoint is to place a politician. This is analogous to the organize action for voters. In this instance, though, you can place only one politician in a target state, but then you get to immediately activate all the friendly voters there. So the cost is not cheap. It costs 3 action points. And if you are appointing in a state that is not a state in which you have presence, it's plus 1 AP for every state away from a state with presence. Politicians do not worry about parity. That's their big advantage. What are their big advantages? So let's say we have a situation like this. We've got Republicans have 3 unactivated voters in Pennsylvania. They appoint a politician here. That costs 3 AP. Then they get their free activate action, which simply stands up those politicians. So that's how that one works. The last of these 4 campaign actions affecting voters and politicians is the Stump action, which lets you move politicians in the same way that canvass lets you move voters. Take this action and you can move 1 to 3 politicians to adjacent states, then activate voters there for free. So that works the same way as in Appoint. I'll show you. The cost for this is the same as canvassing voters. 1 action point for the first move. The second move of the same or a different politician is an additional 2 AP. The third, 3 AP. You will need to pay an extra AP to cross a subregion boundary, and you do not have to worry about parity again, because this is one of the politician's virtues. So let's say we had a situation like this. The Republicans have 2 unactivated voters in Pennsylvania. They have a voter in Virginia, and they have a politician there. And that politician is simply going to stump into Pennsylvania. That will cost 1 AP because it's the first such move, and an additional AP because it's crossing a subregional boundary. And now that politician gets to activate those units for free, just as would happen with an Appoint. Now we turn to these 3 special actions. The first of these is Lobby, which you use to restore your hand of action cards. Take this action and you can discard any or all action cards in your hand. Then you get to draw 2 from the deck. That costs 1 action point. You can repeat that whole thing until your hand limit is filled. If you do one of these and you draw over your hand limit, you draw to 6 cards, you get to look at both of those cards, discard 1, and retain the other one in your hand. So you'll have 5 cards. I'll talk about this in a minute, but after your party's action token passes the election token on the action track, you also get a free lobby action to restore your hand. You'll be concerned about 3 piles of cards on the table. The first is the deck of action cards. The next is a pile of action card discards. You discard action cards when they're used for patronage, or if you're using the optional rule for contesting elections, these get discarded. They'll be reformulated into a deck at the beginning of the next election cycle. If you use a card for its AP value, whether or not you've gotten the benefit of its historical event, it goes out of the game. So let's imagine you want to take a lobby action. You choose 3 cards that are going to go to the discard pile. You send those back. You're going to keep 2. And then on the first draw, you're going to get 2 cards. Then the second draw, that would take you to 6 cards. It would take you over to your hand limit. You look at them both and select 1. That action in total would cost you 2 action points. That's ultimately what your hand will look like. The next special action is the Caucus action. And you use this action to try to control the timing of state elections. What it lets you do is add 1 voter or return 1 opposing voter to a card on the front burner or back burner. And the reason why this is important is that you can't poll or hold state elections in a state that has an opposing voter on it. Only that player will be able to. Also, you can't, if you have a state in the back burner with an opposing voter on it, you can't move it to the front burner. Only the player who has that voter on it. But you can remove those as well. So it's a way of thinking about the timing of state elections and how you might control them. It's going to cost 2 AP for the first state, 3 AP for the second state, etc. So let's imagine the front burner and back burner here. Constitutional Union spends 2 AP to place a voter on Pennsylvania because it thinks doesn't want it to advance. If New Hampshire were to have a state election, then perhaps Pennsylvania would advance, and the Constitutional Unionists aren't ready to have that election. They're afraid that maybe the Northern Democrats or Republicans would win the state, so they put a voter there for 2 AP. The Southern Democrats, let's say, put a voter on the front burner. They want Louisiana to come up, so they're making sure that they have control over that election. Continuing this example, so the same array. Let's say the Republicans want to put, they use 2 caucus actions. 1 to remove the Constitutional Union voter and 1 to place their own. That's going to cost 2 for the first one, 3 for the second one, so a total of 5 action points. And then let's say the Northern Democrats don't want Louisiana to go up for election because their opponents, the Southern Democrats, will win it. So they spend a caucus action and 2 AP simply to remove that Southern Democratic voter. That's how that works. The last of these special actions is a very important one. This is the poll action, which lets you hold state elections and claim cards for their victory point value from the election array. Play this action, and you can hold elections in front burner states, more than 1 if you want. You have to have presence in the state, and the state card must be free of opposing voters, right? So if someone's caucused in there, you won't be able to bring that up yourself. At the beginning of the action, you state all the states that you want to claim, and you'll pay 1 AP for each of those. If you are playing the optional contested election rule, it's possible that you bring a state up, but that you don't win it. Either way, you will pay for that action point for that state to come up because you have declared ahead of time every state you intend to hold elections in. Then there's an election procedure for each state I'll look at in just a second. and then you get to take a free lobby action to restore your hand by virtue of passing the election token. Any action that gets you across that election token will give you this free lobby. It's just that very often when you cross that election token, you will be taking this action. So that's just a reminder. Here's the election procedure. First, you're going to declare all the front burner states you'll hold elections in and pay for those. For each of those states, you'll go one by one. The acting party chooses the order. The party with the most votes on it wins the card. Break ties. That process has been detailed earlier. Here at this place where you've counted the votes, if you choose this optional rule, you can contest the vote. And the way you do this is that all parties in the state can choose from their hand action cards of matching state. That is, that have the little state icon at the top that matches the state card being held for election. Everyone selects, puts them face down on the table with their hand covering it, so you might have none under there. Then everyone reveals at the same time each such card that matches state is worth an additional vote. So it's possible, if you play by this rule, that you will hold an election but not win it. So you resolve, you figure out who won after breaking ties, then you get to claim the card. You're going to, if you win this card, you will meld it in front of you at state value. Those little stars are the victory point value. They will be evident for everybody. You can also claim the spoils of office now. And what this does is let you meld on top of that state card any action cards in your hand that match the state. So if you got Missouri and you have a Missouri card in your hand, you can now play it, and you will add to the victory point value the action point value of the action card. So when you play an action card for patronage, regardless of its action points, it's only worth one additional action point. When you play it here as spoils of office, it is worth in victory points its action point value. And you can do this with as many matching cards as you may hold in your hand. It's just a way of buffing your electoral victories as the game goes on, but of course it gives you interesting choices to make about the use of your action cards. Then you will promote from the back burner a card to fill the front burner. You have to mind the rule of 3, and then you'll restore the back burner row from the deck of state election cards. Here's just a little diagram on what that can look like. You're always going to fill the election array from the leftmost possible position to the right, pushing over any cards as needed. So in this example, a South card A is holds state election. Somebody wins that. The player winning decides to promote a Western state E into the front burner array. They can do this because it does not violate the rule of 3, but they push over cards in order to make that happen. So that is an overview of the poll action. I'll give you some action track details here next. Let's look at what this might look like played out on the action track. So here we have turn 1. We have the initial order of parties: Republican, Northern Democrat, Constitutional Union, Southern Democrat. Each spent action points and wound up in this situation with the gray numerals being their previous place in the party order. Let's say on turn 2, the Northern Democrats move first. They don't pass the election token, so they can't do the poll action and hold state elections, nor do they get that free lobby action. That only happens when their action token passes over the penny. The Southern Democrats in green did in fact pass the election token, but they chose not to poll. They still get a free lobby action by virtue of passing the penny. The Republicans did poll. They held elections in 3 states. They announced that up front and spent those action points on the action track only. Let's say that they won 2 of those but lost one when it was contested in a contested election. The Constitutional Unionists went last. They polled in only 1 state and won it. Now, let's say on the 3rd turn, the Northern Democrats do poll. They polled in 2 states. So they cross the election token, they get their free lobby action, everything. Now all the party tokens have passed the election token. The election cycle ends. There's a reset procedure. Mostly it's about shuffling decks of cards. You'll reconstitute the action card deck and the stake card deck. And but the key thing here that I want to show you is look at that penny. It's moved forward 10 spaces from the party's last starting position. So it is 10 spaces ahead of the party that was furthest ahead when that happened, when the Northern Democrats finished their turn and crossed the election token. Later on, the Republicans will use 2 action points to move ahead. But the red action token, the reason why it has pink around it is to show you that that's the place from which we counted 10 spaces forward to reset the election token. And then you just go again. Let me show you some election examples here. We have the board. Michigan and Indiana cannot be won, nor Kentucky. These are, quote, unwon states. If an election were held, nobody could win it because the leading party has no activated voters. In fact, none of these parties have activated voters. In Ohio, we can count votes. The Northern Democrats have 1 activated voter and 1 unactivated voter for 1.5 votes. The Constitutional Unionists have half a vote for the unactivated, which couldn't win anyway. And the Republicans have a politician there, but they're not worth any votes, nor do they have voters there. In Illinois, we have to go to a tiebreaker. The Northern Democrats and Republicans both have 1 vote there. The Constitutional Union is not in this because they only have half a vote. So we need to go to the tiebreakers. The first tiebreaker is the most politicians in the state. They're even there. Then we go to the subregion. And it looks from here as if the Republicans win this tie because they have a politician in Ohio, but the Northern Democrats, let's say they don't have a politician in any other Great Lakes state. So Illinois is currently being won by the Republicans. Here's an example of how you can claim the spoils of office. You get to meld action cards from your hand. So let's look at, I think before we were looking at instance of Delaware. A party has won the state. They collect this state election card. We'll place it face up in front of them. It's worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. But to collect the spoils of office, they at this time meld campaign ephemera, which was in their hand. Now this matches state. It has a little picture of Delaware on the top of it. And what happens now, you play this card on top of the Delaware card or splay it, and it adds its AP value to the state value or victory point value of Delaware. So now this meld Delaware is worth a total of 4 for this player. You couldn't do this in the future if you got more Delaware cards. You can only do it at this point in the game. I want to talk a little bit about, I've talked about these action cards and sort of the action system and how they work, but I haven't talked about the events themselves. The bonus actions that you get if you're a preferred party in a preferred location are mechanically related to the type of card that we're talking about here. So this is a listing of the sort of categories of card that I've included here, and the specific examples that go with each. There's a total of 100 cards in this game. Some of them are not represented here because there's some duplicates and fusion cards and stuff like that that don't really speak to this question of historical events. But you get a sense here of what the game is trying to bring in. And in the materials accompanying the game, there will be a book, a resource book, that will include blurbs for each one of these. So if you're playing, if you're working with this game in the classroom, that will be helpful. Another take on this. So here's just a sense of what this book is about. There will be introductory essays up front that have already been written. There will be those blurbs. There'll be a section on for further reading, but a large chunk of this is made up of primary source documents. And I built this reader over this summer for my use in the classroom. So I will be using this in my Coming of the Civil War class this fall. The reader has about 110 documents in it right now. It's broken up into these 10 categories. And I just put some sample titles of these documents in just so you get a sense of what is going on here. Okay, let's move on to the climax of the game, the presidential election. Game end trigger is when you can't fill the front burner of the election array because there are not enough cards to do it without violating the rule of 3. It's usually, I think, about half to 2/3 of the deck through. First thing you do is hold election day. This is an optional rule. What you can do here is start in party order. You're going to go around. Each party may play one one action card from its hand. If it matches state, one of the states on that card, you can add a full vote to that state on your behalf. And you're going to keep doing this one card at a time in this serial order until everyone passes. If you pass, you're out. In order to do this, you have to have presence and parity in the state. Then you're going to count votes. You're going to determine the winner of each state. In this election, all voters are worth 1 vote, whether they are activated or not. There are 2 exceptional states for the presidential election. This follows history. So New Jersey splits its electoral votes. There's a little rule for that in the game. And South Carolina did not have a popular vote. It appointed electors by state legislature. So there, instead of counting voters to see who South Carolina voted for in the presidential election, you only count politicians. This does not impact state elections in either of these states. If one party has achieved that magic goal of at least half of all electoral votes, this would be 152 out of 303 possible, that party wins the presidency in an electoral majority. It will win the game. All other parties can rank themselves by points, but it doesn't matter. If you win an electoral victory, then you are in first place no matter what. If one of the parties does not win such a majority, then as per the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, the election becomes a contingent election that goes to the House of Representatives, and there each House delegation has 1 vote. And so in this game, and so that nullifies the high electoral value of states like Ohio and New York and Pennsylvania. Here, it only matters which party is winning the most states. And then there's a system for endgame scoring. So the election is the big thing, but this is a pointified game that helps give you objectives within the game and make sure that there's no runaway leader. There's a sheet that comes with the game, a little aid called the State Vote Tracker. This is purely for reference, and you can put cubes on here to denote which party, if any, is winning a state. And this gives you other kinds of resource information. You would update this on the fly if you chose to use it that way. Here is the sheet, the final scoring sheet. Basically, it scores these three things. How did you do in the general election? You'll get victory points for the number of electoral votes you got in the most states won. The spoils of office. These are those state election cards that you've melded, perhaps with action card bonuses on them. And then subregion wins. You get points for basically not just having presence in subregions, but for winning states in subregions. So if you just won one state in every subregion, you would have the max number of points here. Here's a blow up of that sheet just to show you. This is the top half of it, points for election results, bottom half of it for the other things. That is an irrepressible conflict. I hope you are interested in this game. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, please don't hesitate to be in touch.